because as always, we like to record these sessions for those who can't join us live. So welcome to another exciting session. This time we're going to be talking about local change agents in our continuing series of effective change management when it comes to managing projects. So just some quick logistics as we get started. Your host today, David Donaldson, myself, as always, with Scott Roberts helping us out on the technical side. So if anyone does have any issues with the sound, the audio, logging in, etc., just fire Scott a quick email. You can get him at info@titleshift.ca. Also on the logistical side, you have a little raise your hand icon near the top of your screen. If you have a question or something, raise your hands. We'll see that on our side and we'll make sure that we get to you. There's the chat box. You can enter in comments at any time, questions, that sort of thing. And again, Scott will be helping me monitor that. And then finally, of course, we always accept applause. All right. So last month's poll, we started out with this question around change initiatives and how many change initiatives succeed. And according to John Cotter's research, it's only about 30%. So that's saying 70% of change initiatives fail. And anytime we're leading a project, we are leading a change initiative. So some pretty dismal stats. And I know that stats like that can sometimes make us feel a little bit depressed around the work that we're doing, and we kind of look at that and say, well, how can we do better? So looking at another piece of research from IBM in 2008, and there's a few top performers who are exceeding 80% success rates. So we're going to start off our session today. Our first question: how do we get from a 30% success rate to a 50% success rate? So I'm going to just pop into the chat box below there and enter in what do you think is going to enable us to get from 30% to 80%. Okay, multiple attendees are typing in here. People change management from Ed, absolutely, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this really is going to be a key message from our session today. We need to be managing the change as well as the project. So thank you for that, Ed. From Mary, mentoring and coaching, absolutely. One of the things I think that's often underappreciated when it comes to managing change is the skills that are required. I mean, we take a look at our skill set as a project manager. Managing a project is a different skill set than the context or the deliverable that we are actually delivering. Many times we're an expert in our field, we're promoted up, we're then asked to manage projects going in that direction. So we have a different skill set. From Angela, buy-in, absolutely buy-in. From Rajesh as well, buy-in from stakeholders. Now, an interesting concept when it comes to buy-in. You can't get buy-in, you can't force buy-in. What you can do though is you can get participation, or what I like to refer to as join-in. And this concept of join-in versus buy-in I actually got from a fabulous book called Leadership is Half the Story. And leadership is half the story. I'm just going to pop that into our chat box in case you're interested. And it's a fantastic book, but one of the things it talks about is instead of looking for buy-in, we get that join-in. And this is exactly what Lauren's talking about when she says involving the stakeholders in the process. The more we can involve those stakeholders, the more we can engage them. Thank you, John. The more we can get those folks who are participating, and hence that leads to that buy-in, right? So engage those stakeholders from John, and I agree. Engage them, not only engage them, but engage them early. From R. Jane, align and buy in on vision, absolutely, and clarity on what is the problem where we're attempting to solve via the change, and everyone in the team understanding that, absolutely. So one of the factors that we often talk about when we get into change is change fatigue. And change fatigue really comes from changes that are done for the sake of change. we need to have a very clear picture of where we're going, why we're getting there, or why we're going there, excuse me, and what problem it is we are trying to solve. From Alar, involve those stakeholders, again, that we were chatting about. Clear and ongoing communication from Janice. Hope I got your name correctly. Absolutely, and I think that there's two elements to that which are really key. The first one is clear. We need to make sure that our communications are clear, they're effective, and when we talk about clear communication, it's about making sure that we're hitting the communication at the level of the stakeholder we're communicating to. That's the clear part. The ongoing is also key. It is almost impossible, and I say almost, to over-communicate in a change, because we are so inundated in today's world with information. We are so inundated with, people are getting literally hundreds of emails a day. It's easy for important messages to fall from, the top of the pile from consciousness. We're digging into stuff, and it's like, when someone mentions something, it's like, oh yeah, I sort of remember something about that, but I'd forgotten. So, especially at key times during your change, you want to be kind of bringing that information and messaging back into the top of mind. So we've got some great ideas as to how we can move from 30 to 80%. Now, when we talk about some of the success factors, we need to have effective change management at multiple levels. We need senior management, we need middle management, but we also need frontline staff. So we need this level of commitment, this level of effectiveness, or at those multiple levels. It doesn't work when you only have it at one or even two of them. We need to have it at all three. And from that same IBM study that found 80 folks doing 80% or better success rate, here was the 4 key activities that they had identified from their research. We're gonna take a closer look at each one of these. The first is to prepare. And I love the way they put it in the study. They said realistically prepare. We're often putting together these project plans, we're hitting a timeline, we're making something that works based on imposed deadlines, based on imposed budgets, but they're not really realistic. And have we really realistically dug in and figured out how complex this change really is, and whether it, and marrying that with the level of complexity of managing that project? Which really leads us to our second point. We need a good, robust change management methodology that's aligned with a good, robust project management methodology. As PMs, I've often seen, we've often seen folks, doing a good project management methodology, but not a good change management methodology. Okay, so we get into that. We need that alignment on the two. I'm just going to pause here for a second because I see Carol says, can someone send me the number to call in? I wrote it down wrong. Carol, we don't do call in for these sessions. We only do, and I'm telling her this, and she won't be able to hear us. We only do voice over IP. So let me just pop a quick note in here. Only VoIP. There we go. Okay. So we need those two methodologies aligned, and when we get that alignment, they start to support each other. We need the PM methodology to support on the technical side. We need the change management to support on the human side. Now, we need to also build and apply those change management skills, and this is what we were talking about just a few moments ago. We talk about the at the multiple levels. We need to have those skills at those multiple levels. Now, all of this costs money. All of this takes time, energy. We need to invest in that change management. We'll dig into this in a little bit. So, I'm going to launch into a poll here. I want to just get an idea. As someone who is experiencing change, who do you listen to the most? Do you listen to senior management the most? Do you listen to middle management the most? Do you listen to your direct manager / supervisor? Do you listen to your peers, or no one because you're a maverick and you play by your own rules? So I want you to just kind of check that off. Now, if you are middle management, And senior is kind of your direct manager, supervisor. I'd like you to choose the direct manager, supervisor, so that we kind of look at it's relative to your position in the organization. Let's give a few moments for that voting. It's coming in fast and furious. We'll give it a few more moments. Okay, we'll get ready. We'll close this down in a few seconds. All right, let's call it there. End the poll, broadcast the results. Okay, resounding results here. 63% are saying direct manager or supervisor, absolutely. And this is what the results, the research is showing us. People pay the most attention, and I really wanted to emphasize that word most. We all listen to senior management, we all listen to middle management, we all listen to our peers, but we really turn to our direct manager, our direct supervisor for that kind of real touchstone as to where we're at. Yes, we do listen to senior management, and depending upon our focus in the organization, especially in very large organizations, frontline staff, they'll tend to look to their peers and direct managers much more so. If you are middle management or you are more up in the tiers, you may be looking towards senior management a bit more. So hence we see the second one there being senior management, and then of course middle management coming in. And that's very indicative of the type of results we tend to see with this question. Folks look mostly to their direct manager, supervisor for their for where they should go when we're talking in terms of a change. And without good support at those levels, people are going to look to their supervisor, to their manager, to their peers. They're going to say, what do you think? Now, we're hearing the message from senior management for sure, but we're also looking for that confirmation. So we need to see it and hear it from all of those levels. Oh, and I noticed, by the way, in our poll, we didn't have any Mavericks today, which is a good thing. All right. Now, when we talk about key activities, we talk about preparation. And this is where I really love the wording from this research by IBM. To gain deep and realistic insight into the complexity of the change. Now, change can often look on its surface very simple. Oh, we're going to swap out these two systems. We've got this current existing computer system. It may be a legacy system. It may be on some, older platform, and we're going to swap it out for some newer piece of technology, and no big deal, right? But let's not forget that the end users who are going to be the targets of this change, who are going to be the ones implementing this, they are highly impacted by even some of the subtlest minor changes. We see this in the world of marketing when you change the packaging. And I know in the marketing world, they're very careful and cognizant of packaging and how it's changing, because we create this brand recognition. My good buddy Gary, he's a bit of a car aficionado, and he's making the comment the other day around how particular car manufacturer does a real poor job of branding, and it's kind of hard to recognize their cars. And then you look at other car brands that are very iconic. I mean, you quick glance at a front grille and it's a BMW, right? It's a Mercedes-Benz, right? You can create this sort of brand recognition, and that creates a lot of comfort level with users. So when we start changing things, we do a minor interface change. We rearrange some things, maybe even change the color a bit or something like that. To an end user, that can be very impactful. To a coder who's affecting that change, to someone who's looking very much at the back end of the system and making sure it functions well, it's such a minor change, it's almost non-existent. I was going through a change. I was actually supporting an organization going through a change. We were implementing a large tracking system for some work that they did, and it was consolidating a couple of other systems. And the gentleman who was writing the code, late in the project, he made a change where we went from think it was 7 modules to 5 modules or something like this. He consolidated a couple of aspects of the software. He's like, oh, no big deal. It's not a big change. But the thing was, he had changed the user interface. So the engine was unchanged. The way the system functioned behind the scenes was unchanged. But the user interface was changed. Now, my role on this project was to write the training, to train the trainers, to put that training team together and then go out across the province and deliver this. This was a huge change for us. We went from a 7-module piece of software to a 5-module piece of software. The user interface looks completely different. The complexity of the change at the technical back end was relatively low. The complexity of the change at the front end, at the user interface level, was huge. Right? And the thing is, we need to have realistic insight into that complexity of the change, and then we need to plan accordingly. And it's very easy, very, very easy in this world to get lost in some of those details, to look at it very much from the PM side, the project management side of, this is the technical thing that we're implementing, and technically it's a relatively small adjustment, but from an end user perspective, it can be quite huge. So we want to make sure that we plan that accordingly. The next key activity that we identified out of that research is around the methodology and getting the two methodologies aligned. So we need a robust change methodology. Absolutely. We need a robust project management methodology. But more importantly, those two methodologies need to align. Now, when we talk in terms of project management and change management, if we think in terms of life cycle, our PM life, and let's just do a quick little graphic here. We'll just do a quick little draw, and let's say that this is the life of the project. Okay, so I'm just going to put a P up here. Okay, so there's my project life. Now, the change life, and I'm just going to do the change in a different color here, so let's go with green. The life of the change starts before the project, and it continues past the end of the project. Okay, so we think about the project. We have this idea, we're going to implement it. The project ends when we have installed it, when we've implemented it, we get sign-off from the customer. And the thing, whatever that is, the new piece of software, the new piece of technology, the new physical asset like a building, has been implemented. But it's this zone post-implementation here where we're looking at uptake, where we're looking at leveraging that new technology and using it, right? So here in this beginning phase, we're looking at, how do we prepare folks for it? How do we get that input? When I asked you, how do we go from 30% success to 80% success? One of the things you said is engage those stakeholders, and we all agreed, engage them early. We should be doing that here in this zone here, so that when we get to this point here where we're starting the project and we're actually starting to design and plan out what we're going to build, we've already got some of that input. We've already got folks who are engaged, who are brought in, who are starting to have some of that buy-in, right? Now, there's a balancing act here, as there always is. There's a balancing act here in that when we start too far ahead, we can sometimes lose that urgency. And when we start too late, then we're not engaging those stakeholders, and we're not giving them the opportunities that they need to give us that input and sort of be effective in that regard. So we need to align those two very, very well. And the better we do that, the better we're able to have effective uptake on our changes. So the next piece that we look at is skills. So the other key activity that we're looking at is, do we have the effective skills? Do we need to build? We need to apply those skills. Now, we need to do this within our sponsors, within our change managers, and within our empowered staff. And we call these folks change agents. So these are the agents who are helping drive that change, who are supporting that change, who are helping bring that through. Now, in the world of project management, we often talk about champions, which we talk about that in change and change management as well. Who are the champions? These are your change agents. These are the folks who are going to help us move through the change, support that change, and more importantly, support the staff who are going through that. How are we going to enable that so that as we move through the change, our targets, the folks who actually have to change, are supported, feel supported, and are hence enabled to. And this is where we talk about that empowered staff, because again, we're going to be looking towards our direct supervisor, our direct manager for direction here. We're going to look to our peers. Yes, we're going to look to senior management and middle management for direction, but what I'm really talking about now is the actual change itself. So we think about that new piece of software that's coming out. It's going to hit every employee across our organization. It is really the frontline staff that is truly highly impacted. Typically in that type of an environment, middle management, senior management, they're not going to be that much impacted because they're not using the same tools that your frontline staff is. And this is where we start to sometimes not have a clear, good, robust, realistic picture of the nature and complexity of that change. What might seem like a smaller, high-level change to us at that end user level, at that frontline staff level, can be really big. Think about the last time your software was upgraded, Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or whatever products you're using. And when they introduce the new ribbon up at the top that expands and collapses, and they introduce a new way to kind of work with the software. From a technical perspective, it's kind of all the same, right? We click somewhere and it turns our text to bold and underlined and formats and all that kind of fun stuff. But to the end user, that can be quite a dramatic change until we get used to it. My sister, they recently bought a new car, and instead of having the shifter, you press the button and move the lever down in the kind of center of the console that we've all been used to for years, there's a little button up on the end of the windshield wiper lever, and you press this button to change gears. So she goes to look at this new car and goes to test drive one. Dealer gives her the keys, they head out into the car, they get in the car, they start it, which now works differently too because it's a press button. And after a few minutes of trying to figure it out, they went back inside and said, how do you put this thing in gear? Right? And it seems like such a minor change, but to an end user, to someone who's that frontline staff who's going to be impacted by that change, they need to have some education, as it were. So it's interesting how we kind of look at this as being such a minor little thing. It's obvious, but to our staff, it can be quite dramatic. One of my favorite success stories of my project life is when I was involved in a transition from a green screen dumb terminal to DOS Windows. Yay, way back then. And people were getting a color screen for the first time. They were getting a graphical user interface for the first time. They were getting a mouse for the first time. So it was really, there was a huge amount of change management that was actually done on that project, which really made it successful. Because the folks who are leading that change recognize that this is big and we need to give them some extra support. But then they installed some change agents, myself being one of those agents, to help that change go through and to support the staff. And they made some pretty big investments in that. So I want to ask you, what do you picture as the role of a change agent? I'll get you to just type in the question box down the bottom there. What do you picture as the role of the change? Okay, I'm loving Beth's answer here. Able to make calls from a shoe. Love it. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, I thought I'd use Agent 86. Hello, Chief, as my example there, my graphic. So thank you for that, Beth. Love it. So Beth is saying able to champion the change, lead folks through the change curve. Absolutely. So last session we took a look at the change curve, and your change agents should be able to help people through that curve. So we think about the skills that are going to be needed for that. And the thing with it is it's a different skill set than leading a project, because leading a project, we're looking at much more the technical. We're looking at the timelines. We're looking at, are the tasks getting done? What's the percentage complete? What's our quality look like? That sort of thing. Change management is really very much about that engagement piece of our stakeholders, especially the change targets, the folks who are actually going to have to change their behaviors. Using the example of the new software coming in, the folks who are writing the code, who are implementing the code, and sometimes even testing that code, are often not the same folks who are going to be using the code, who are not going to be the change targets, the ones who are going to actually have to change their behaviors, right? From Carol, they understand the project details. Absolutely. They understand the projects at a detailed level. Because they're going to need to, because they're going to have those questions. So it's almost the super users, the more informed, and we're going to have to give a little bit of extra support, or not necessarily extra support, but special support to our change agents. We want to make sure that we enable them to be able to field those questions. Okay, with hearing negative feedback. Oh yes, Carol, thank you. Yeah, so your change agents also need to be okay with receiving that negative feedback. So there may be some coaching around how do we deal with that, and how do we process that, and how do we work with that. There was one big project I was working on. It was one of the banks. We were implementing a new system across the entire organization, and there was lots of pushback. So we ended up doing a lot of change management with them, and we had to very skillfully, or carefully, I should say, navigate that field of negative feedback, because of course we've got to be cautious that it doesn't degrade into a gripe session. And the way we did that was to first of all acknowledge that there was a lot of strong feelings. We had to acknowledge that we hadn't fully worked out all the details. We had to give them a vehicle, an avenue for those details so that they could be heard. And what it did is, and Malara, it's building on your point here, is it helped those end users become more comfortable with the change. So we gave them a vehicle to express their concerns, and we let them know where we're going to go through with that. Continuing with our feedback here, from Angela, a cheerleader, absolutely. We want our change agents to be those folks who are leading the charge, that are cheering us on, that are highly supportive. So with that in mind, we want to be very clear and careful who we select as a change agent, because not only do we want to have a good set of skills, but we also want to have those folks who are supporting the change. Help people understand how they will need to be doing things differently. Absolutely, Ed. Many folks are okay with, hey, we're here, current state. Here's where we're going, future state. The question is, how do we bridge? How do we get from A to B? And depending upon your personality type, that transition, that state of flux, can be very uncomfortable for folks, right? Some people deal with that a little bit better than others, but understand how we're going to get from A to B and how they're going to do things differently. You're really kind of, fleshing that out, and this is where we need to have that, clear understanding of the project details and how we're getting through that. From Megan, to be an advocate and a resource for those impacted, absolutely. And thank you, Megan. That's a really important point here, is your change agents need to advocate on behalf of your end users, your targets. Your targets in the change, those folks who are going to have to live the change, who are going to have to do those things differently, they need someone on their side. They need a resource to be able to advocate for them and say, hey, this is what we're feeling, and how do we push that forward? And this really builds on what Mary's saying around the compassionate SME, yes, subject matter expert. We need that empathy. We need that compassion piece. Managing stakeholders, communication, and planning from Susie, absolutely. And while our PM role is to really manage those stakeholders in communication and planning, the change agent really is an extension of us. it helps us, deal with those communications, figure some of that planning out, and figure out some of that stakeholder piece. And one of the big powers, and this is kind of alluding to where we're going, Susie, so thank you for that. One of the big powers of a change agent is they can sometimes know the stakeholders, who to communicate with, how to communicate with them better. And they may also be better enabled to communicate with those stakeholders, because especially if you have a change agent who is one of those stakeholders, so they know what it is. Promoting that buy-in, absolutely. Jackineth, hope I'm getting your name right. The whole, if I'm living it, I'm one of the team, I'm living that, it'll help promote that buy-in. So you're really kind of modeling the behaviors that we're looking for. Represents that end user perspective, makes the end users easing into the change. Absolutely, again, building on that whole advocate piece. From John, identifying factors or obstacles that would hinder adoption. Absolutely, and remove those obstacles. The closer we are to those targets, the closer we are to those folks who are living that change, the better we're able to see. From Lauren, and I love this one, listen, have answers, get answers, a communicator. Love it, absolutely. Listening is super key. We've all been through change. We've all been through change where we felt like we weren't being heard, where we weren't being listened to, and it's just so frustrating. So absolutely love that one, Lauren. From Valley, helping others go through the change, as different people might be at different stages at a given moment in time. Oh, absolutely, 100%. This is what makes managing change so difficult. We've got a very complex system here. We've got a group of people. You've got all kinds of different personality types. You've got all kinds of different, personal histories. You've also got different levels of load when it comes to change. Now, for me personally, I've been through some very big change within the last 6 months. I've been through some pretty big change on my personal life, some very big change on my work life, and they're all layering on top of each other. And what ends up happening is different people process change differently. They go through that change differently, absolutely. But it also about the moment of time, because while you may have someone who's very resilient, who's very able to go through change and seems to flow along nicely, and then all of a sudden, they kind of hit that critical mass and they don't get through it. They really struggle. Okay, so thank you for that. And then finally from Rajesh, the change agent should demonstrate being trusted. Absolutely, trust is so huge, Rajesh. We need to, whomever our change agents are, they need to have that level of trust. It's very important for us as change leaders to instill that level of trust, both within our team as well as within the kind of larger population that is going through the change as well. So thanks, guys, for all that fantastic feedback. Now, we're going to pop into our next poll directly, and I'm curious how many of you are currently using change agents. And it may be at all times, absolutely. Sometimes no, but plan to. No, our focus is on that time and budget piece. Or change what now? Give you guys a few moments to vote. All right, let's give you guys a few more minutes to vote. Okay, let's close this down in about 5 seconds or so. Looks like we've kind of got to our critical mass here. So the majority of you, 66%, are sometimes. We've got one who's doing change agents all the time, and for that person, when we get into kind of the benefits and things a little bit later on, I'd love to hear from you around how effective that is. So we've got the majority saying sometimes, we've got some saying no, but I plan to. and then a few people who are no, they focus on the delivery and time and budget. I just want to address that last one first. It is unfortunate we sometimes are forced into this scenario. We're dealing with limited money, we're dealing with limited timelines, we're running hard and fast, we're trying to get this done, and it can be a bit of a tough sell to justify the extra time and money. It does greatly enhance and increase our capability of delivering, and while it may seem like we're into a longer, more expensive path, oftentimes that turns out to be faster, cheaper, and more importantly, more effective in the long run. One of the number one questions I always get when I have these conversations is, how do we get buy-in? How do we get people to, buy into the change? And it's through change management that we're going to get that. So for those of you who are not doing it at this time, there's a focus on time and budget, let's have those conversations with our sponsors, with our management teams, to try and help them see the benefits and how we're actually gonna be saving some time and money in the long run. It feels counterintuitive, but the research is in and it's there. Glad to see some folks who aren't doing it yet that are working towards it. Really happy to see how many are actually doing it, even though it's only sometimes. This is gaining momentum, folks. This is increasing through time, and as we continue down this path, we're going to be seeing more and more and more of this. It really is a hot topic at this point. Okay. So thank you for that feedback. I want you to consider this. Quick scenario here. We're leading a change. We have 15 remote offices. They're spread out across 6 time zones. We have a tight budget of always, but the travel budgets have been justified. But we don't want to be doing that amount of travel. It's not necessarily effective. While we're in one site, the other 14 are kind of being neglected. How do we do this? How do we work with this? And how can we become more effective? And the answer is a local change agent. Now, this session, we actually called it the local change agent. When we talk in terms of change agents, we're talking, senior management, we're talking sponsor, we're talking the various levels and the champions. A local change agent, on the other hand, is a specific type that, think of them as being embedded with the troops. So a local change agent is one who is going to be there on site. So in our scenario where we've got 15 remote offices, distributed out, these are the folks who are going to give us that rich face-to-face conversations. If I'm trying to manage it centrally, kind of worst case, I'm doing it through email. Kind of a medium case, I'm doing, teleconferencing, and kind of like what we're doing here, where we've got the video and we can actually see the other person and we have a bit of that face-to-face, albeit through technology. We're still wrestling with the time zone issues. Best case scenarios, I'm actually traveling to those sites and meeting the people in person. But again, you're now distributing yourself thin across those 15 sites. Our local change agent, they're going to have the rich communication because they're physically there. So we've already got the higher rich communication piece. But more importantly, they're also the boots on the ground. They're the folks who are going to be there, day after day as the team goes through the change, as they implement, and as all those nuanced little details come out. And this goes back to our earlier conversation when we talk about the empathy piece. And, I've had people say to me, it's like, well, you don't understand because you're not here. Come here and you'll understand. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. There absolutely is. The downside, of course, especially in a scenario like this, you got 15 sites. You can't be in all 15 at once. And you'll have to do this sequentially, so which means it may take a month or longer. Like even if I do it within a month, there's 20 working days in the month. I've got 15 sites to get to. If we're across 6 time zones, we're probably going to, overseas. There's 4 time zones in North America. So we're now into some serious amount of travel. You're going to be layering a month or 2 at the beginning of your project just to go do that series of meetings, let alone consolidating the information and actually doing something with it. So get a network of local change agents in place. Not only will that increase the richness of the communication, but it'll have the boots on the ground so that they can be there and monitoring and supporting you on a more day-to-day basis. Now, you need to get the right folks, right? Much like any project, when you are dealing with resources on your project, availability is not a skill. We need to get the right skills. We need to get folks with connections. We need to get those influential folks who network across that site. So, when we look at the Regina office or the Calgary or the Vancouver office or Halifax, we need to get the right folks in those sites as our local change agents, the ones with the connections, the ones who are going to, not titled necessarily, the ones who have those connections that are going to, be able to talk and focus with those folks. But we also need the skills, and I'm talking about the skills of managing change. And a big part of the local change agent's job is to help coach those staff in those sites through the change. So we may need to do a bit of an investment with the change agents to help develop some of those skills. We're all very good at our jobs. And unless we're leading projects as a job, typically folks don't have a high level of skill around managing change. And especially if they're more frontline staff, if they're more subject matter experts in the field, their job is to get that thing, whatever it is, done. They're not specifically skilled around managing change. So we may need to coach them and help them. Now, given this scenario, I would not use my travel budget to fly from site to site and visit personally. I'd use my travel budgets to bring my local change agents together. So instead of me flying out to 15 sites, I'm going to get 15 people to fly into my site, and we're going to, set some of that expectations and build those skills and do those kinds of things. Now, depending upon the nature of this change and what those sites look like, I would definitely be visiting some of the sites, but not necessarily all of them. Again, you would have to play that out very situationally. It also might make sense to do them in smaller groups where you bring 2 or 3 or 5 of the sites together based on time zones and things like that. Now, all of that sounds great if we're doing a big, large change, but what if we're doing a small change? Everyone's in the same location. We've got a small project management team. I contend through my experience and through the research, yes, still do the same thing. And let me give you a quick war story on this. So the crucial question you want to ask is, are you the right person when it comes to managing those key stakeholders? Because here's another huge benefit to the local change agent. Local change agents can sometimes be better equipped, skilled, connected to talk to and help those dealing with the change move through the change. And let me share this experience. And I've used this example before in other sessions. So I was the subject matter expert. I was the team member on this project. And here's the project team, me. Now, there was a separate project manager, because in the structure, they were the organization I was with at the time was moving to a much more structured environment, and they were having formal PMs do all this kind of stuff. Now, what we were doing is we were bringing 4 different departments together under one system. And I had been with one department for several years, and I was that client for a while. I helped build the second department, so I knew their systems, and I'd actually help build that system. And then the other 2, I hadn't really worked with that closely. But the project manager was a technical guy. He was and he was very good, don't get me wrong, but he was a software IT, central corporate IT person. He wasn't embedded in any one of those departments. He wasn't, involved in them in any way other than, running these projects. And those departments, especially the first 2 that I mentioned, said, no, we need Dave to do this because he knows our systems, he knows our people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, during that project, this project manager, he actually told me not to talk to the stakeholder. Everything had to go through him. And I tried to advise him a bit. And he wanted to do a beta rollout at a very inappropriate time, at a time when the departments were so swamped that they had 0 time to look at anything. And I was like, you know what, you've got to wait 6 weeks. But he was so focused on his timelines and his budgets and managing the project that he didn't consider the impact that this change is having on those folks. Now, one of the impacts that we need to be cognizant of is the concept of a dual operating system. On one side, we need to keep the lights on. We need to keep the daily function of the organization going. We need to get our jobs done. On the other side, we need to change, and change takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources. So we've got to find this balance between the two, because there are some times where we're going to up the change side of things, and then we're going to up the keeping the lights on and finding that balance. And we're into that situation where we needed to up keeping the lights on because we were heading into year end. These folks were absolutely swamped, and they did not have any capacity to deal with anything else. But my PM would not take the advice. He refused to do that. He pushed to try to get it through, and I tried to give him the heads up, and I tried to warn him. And what was happening was he was talking to them, then the client was coming back and talking to me, because they're like, Dave, what the heck's going on here? So are you the right person to talk to that stakeholder? And I've been in that position where I was not the right person to talk to the stakeholder, and then you hand it off to someone who is. So hence you have your local change agent, and you give them that responsibility, and you leverage it. You've got a really good skilled resource who has that connection, who has those abilities. You know what? Let's let them run with it for a bit. Okay. Finally, the last key activity here is we need to invest. We need to invest appropriately in change management. We need to invest in our people, give them the skills, put the resources in place, whether that's in the form of the travel budgets to go back and forth to visit the sites to have that more personal touch, whether that's in the form of the training for the local change agents to enable them to do their work. But we need to invest. It takes time and money, folks. Now, if you want to move from 30% success on average to over 80% success on average, we need to make that investment. You will get what you pay for. It is a tough sell, though, and I recognize that. And it is something that's very difficult, but the good news is the business world in general is really starting to recognize this. They're really starting to appreciate this, and they are hence starting to invest. So we are seeing that turning a corner. It's still going to take a little while, but we're starting to see that, which is good. Now, the benefits of projects with good or excellent change management, and this comes out of some ProSci research, above 80% success. So when they looked at a study of multiple projects and said, let's rate the change management on there, and on that scale of good to excellent, 80% of those projects were successful. Of the projects that were rated as poor to fair on the change management side, there was below 50% success rate. The reality is, the more we invest and put into that change management side, the more likely our projects are to be successful. Now, in a similar research, the majority of respondents attributed project management success directly to effective change management. When we have that, not only do we see the direct results of successful projects more likely to have good change management, we're also seeing that people are recognizing it. So the majority of respondents are saying this project was a success, and the success was directly attributed to effective change management. Some other benefits here: when we have good effective change management, we have improved adoption speeds. Again, we look at that whole timeline cost piece. If I am delivering projects that fail, regardless of being on budget, on time, they are wasting money. So in my book, I think it's much more effective to spend a little bit extra to have a successful project than to spend a little bit less and have a failure. It's kind of like buying a car for $20,000. It's cheaper than the $30,000 car, but it doesn't work. It's kind of a waste of money. We have improved utilization rates. So when people utilize that thing. This is an interesting concept. So in the 8 years I've been here at Title Shift, in my classes, I'll ask people, has anyone been on a project where the product that was implemented was not used? And it's almost unanimous. Every hand goes up. And you think about that. We've just spent, $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, whatever it is, to implement this thing, and people didn't use it. Doesn't matter how on budget you are and how on time you are, that project is a failure. And we have wasted that time and money and energy. With effective change management, we're seeing better utilization rates. So we're seeing people picking it up and using it better, and we're seeing improved employee proficiency. And really that's what it's about, because at the end of the day, if we don't have that proficiency, we're going to be losing time, we're going to be losing money, we're going to be losing our competitive advantage. Now, doing that same research, or similar research, 6 to 9 months post-project, we're seeing improved financial results, we're seeing improved performance, we're seeing behavioral change. And this is really the golden nugget, folks. We need that behavioral change, because we implement that new thing. Are they using it? Is the behavior changing? Are they doing things in the new way? Right? And we've all been on projects where the new thing is being used in the old way. So we've redesigned, we've got a new piece of software, whatever that looks like. We've got a new process to be able to do that. Is the behavioral change happening? And with good, effective change management, we're seeing that much more, right? And it's faster, which hence means it's cheaper, it's more effective. So, the research is in, it's really telling us. Just looking at the time, I'm going to step over this one and leave this as a bit of a rhetorical. How can we leverage those change agents? We've got some good stuff already on that. Using them for hearing that local negative feedback, being the boots on the ground, being the pulse of what's actually going on in the field. We've all been on those conference calls from the more senior management folks, and he says, please tell me if it's not working, and of course you got a bunch of crickets on the line, and then they all turn to each other after the call and say, wow, that guy's totally out to lunch and totally disconnected, and he's 2 time zones away at head office, and this kind of stuff. This is where our local change agents are really going to shine and really be effective, because we're going to have a true pulse of what's actually going on. Okay. To wrap all this up, we need consistent support from all levels. We need that consistent support from senior management. We need consistent support from middle management. We need consistent support from our direct supervisor and managers. We also seeing that kind of support from our peers as well. So hence, applying that whole local change agent concept to see those different folks at those different levels. We need to install local change agents. So within our large complex change, when we've got lots of folks moving around in different parts and places, let's put some key people in place so that they are going to go in and affect from the inside and make this a more organic and support that for going forward. And we look at that large complex change with lots of moving parts. Putting in those key resources in those key places are really going to enable and be effective in bringing it all together. And finally, we need to make sure that that alignment with project management it's well aligned. It's a key piece. When I have good, effective change management, when I have good, effective project management, and when those two are aligned, that's when the synergy happens. That's when the magic happens. Because now not only have I got some good support for my people going through the change, but I've also got some really good support from a technical aspect. We know the timelines, we know how this is going to work, we know what's going to be turned on and turned off at various points, and how we're going to do that, and what are the backup plans, and who are the support mechanisms. The change management is about the people. It's about how do the folks work through all of that so that they can understand what it is, and then hence move through that change and move through that change curve more effectively. When done right, it's actually going to take less time, which means less money. So just to finalize our piece, we have a local change agent event coming up on June 14th. We're going to be doing a showcase of our new program, which is the Certified Local Change Agent. For those of you who are aware of our Change Management Practitioner program, which is a 5-day, very designed for people who are leading the change, planning it and designing it. We have actually a 2-day program that is, it's actually a certification program, so there's an exam involved, and you can become a certified local change agent. And this is a great stepping stone towards becoming a change manager, as well as if you're just going to, instill some of those skills and capabilities within your change agents. So put that on your calendar for June 14th. I think is there a cost with that event, Scott? No, it is a free event. Want you to come out and check it out. there's a click here for register. That is a live link, so please feel free to take a moment, click on that. It'll pop open a second window for registration. And we really hope some of you folks will be able to join us on that. Time of day. Link doesn't work? It worked in my test. No, it's working for me. Not sure. Okay. What we'll do is we will be started to work. Okay, there we go. Now working. Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry about that. The time of day for it. What's the details on that, Scott? 8 a.m. till 10:30. So it's a morning event. There'll be a continental breakfast. The 330 Bay, which is just Bay in Adelaide. It's a fantastic facility. Hoping you can come on out. There's a registration link here. We'll also be emailing out the registration link in our post support. So if you don't get a chance to click on it now, if you're running to a meeting, feel free to do that later. So thank you, everyone. There's our PMI code. For those of you collecting PDUs, want to make sure that that gets out there. And if you have any questions, I'm going to stay on the line for a few moments. Please feel free to pop into the chat box and let me know. Otherwise, we will see you next month. And I just drew a blank. What's our session next time, Scott? Do you remember? We've been kind of running fast and hard here at Title Shift. So I know we have another session coming up, and it's the third in our series of 4 around change management. I think it's dealing with reactions, if I remember correctly. That sounds about right. So check the website. You'll be receiving the invites. Thank you guys so much for coming out. As always, love to hear all of your comments and stories, and we'll look forward to working with you next time.